In the middle of the night, on July 17, 1918, the Romanovs, Russia's imperial family, were shot and killed by Bolshevik revolutionaries in Yekaterinburg, Russia. The victims were Nicholas II, who was Russia's ruler at the time, his wife Alexandra, and their 5 children, 17-year-old Anastasia, 19-year-old Maria, 23-year-old Olga, 21-year-old Tatiana, and 14-year-old Alexei, along with their 4 servants, Ivan Karatanov, Alexei Trop, Anna Demidova, and Eugene Butkin. In 1917, long-standing tensions with the already struggling Russian monarchy led to the February Revolution, where mass protests against food rationing took place on February 23rd. Violent encounters with police and mass demonstrations also took place. Another revolution would take place later that same year. On March 5, 1917, Tsar Nicholas II reluctantly abdicated the throne, ending a dynasty which ruled Russia for more than 3 centuries. The monarchy was later replaced with a provisional government led by Georgy Lvov. However, the provisional government quickly grew out of favor, and it was eventually forced to share its power with the Petrograd Soviet, a Bolshevik council that was held in the city of Petrograd, which today is known as St. Petersburg. Following Nicholas's abdication, the Romanovs were placed under house arrest at the Alexander Palace. They were later relocated to Siberia, and finally to the Epitaph House in Yekaterinburg. On June 29, 1918, the Ural Soviet had a meeting in which they agreed that Nicholas should be put to death. There were 23 members of the Central Executive Committee, but only 7 of them attended the meeting, including Vladimir Lenin, Yakov Sverdlov, a Bolshevik administrator, and Felix Dzerzhinsky, a Bolshevik revolutionary. On July 3rd, Bolshevik revolutionary Philip Golishishkin arrived in Moscow with a letter insisting that Nicholas should be executed. Killing Nicholas's wife and children was also discussed during the meeting, but it was kept a state secret to avoid opposition. On July 12th, Golishishkin reported back to Yekaterinburg with a letter about his discussions in Moscow about the Romanovs. He also reported back with instructions that nothing related to the Romanovs executions should be communicated directly to Lenin. The person who led the executions was Yakov Yurovsky, who on July 16th was told that the Red Army were retreating and that the executions could not wait any longer. The Bolsheviks were at war with the Imperial White Army, and on July 16th, they were forced to retreat on all directions. Yurovsky assigned each of his men to a specific victim before handing their weapons to them. He told them to shoot right at their hearts to prevent too much blood loss. Yurovsky was also told to make sure that no trace of the Romanovs could ever be found after the killings. Yurovsky arrived at the house when the family was having dinner on the night of July 17th. He informed them that the kitchen worker, Leonid Sednev, who had already been executed by Bolshevik secret police, was leaving the house to go visit his uncle. The family was upset by this, as he was Alexei's only playmate. Yurovsky then left the house, assuring the family that he would return soon. Yurovsky returned around midnight and told the physician, Eugene Botkin, to wake up the family. He told Botkin that they were being moved to a safer place to escape the chaos in Yekaterinburg. The family was led to a small basement inside the house. Nicholas asked Yurovsky if they could bring 2 chairs, so Alexei and Alexandra could sit down. Yurovsky brought 2 chairs, and the family was ordered to wait in the basement. Moments later, Yurovsky and his men entered the room. Yurovsky then said out loud, "Nikolai Alexandrovich, in view of the fact that your relatives are continuing their attacks on Soviet Russia, the Ural Executive Committee has decided to execute you." Yurovsky then fatally shot Nicholas in the chest 3 times. Alexandra was killed with a shot to the head, and Maria was shot in the thigh. All 4 of the family servants also died in the attack. So many shots were being fired that the entire room filled up with smoke, making it impossible to see anything. Yurovsky eventually had to order his men to stop firing because of the smoke. When the smoke faded away, it was revealed that all the children were still alive, and only Maria was injured. All of the remaining children were ultimately shot and stabbed to death with bayonets. Shortly after the executions, the bodies were loaded onto a truck and taken to a marshy area near the railroad. The bodies were stripped, their faces were smashed with rifle butts, and they were even mutilated using grenades to make sure that the bodies could not be identified. They were then buried in shallow graves that weren't even 9 feet deep. Realizing that the graves were not dug the way he had planned, Yurovsky was then informed of a mine not too far from where they were. The bodies were removed from their shallow graves and reloaded onto the truck. However, during transport, the truck got stuck in mud, and Yurovsky then decided to bury the bodies under the road they were on. They dug graves that were barely 60 centimeters deep and buried the bodies. Sulfuric acid was also used to help the bodies dissolve. The remains of Anna and Alexei were burned in a bonfire and destroyed with spades before being thrown into a pit. Not long after the bodies were buried, news of the killings began to spread all over the city, so Yurovsky moved the bodies to another grave that was later covered with rubble, earth, and railway ties. The White Army conducted an investigation into the killings in 1919. but they could not locate the graves. Investigators conclude that the remains of the Romanovs were cremated at the mine, since they had found evidence of fire at the mine. The Soviet government did not acknowledge the killings until 1926, when an investigation was published in France in 1919. However, they claimed that the bodies were completely destroyed, and that Lenin and his cabinet were not responsible for the executions. In 1977, the Soviet government ordered that the Epitev house, the house that the Romanovs were murdered in, to be demolished in order to destroy evidence of the killings and to silence public discussion of the killings. In 1979, the gravesite was discovered by Detective Alexander Avdonin, but this discovery was not acknowledged by the Soviet government until 1989. In July of 1991, the bodies of Nicholas, Alexandra, and 3 of their daughters were discovered and exhumed after their identities were discovered by DNA identification and forensic examination. On July 17, 1998, 80 years after the killings, the Romanovs were given a state funeral at Peter and Paul Cathedral. However, many key members of the Russian Orthodox Church did not attend because they were skeptical of the authenticity of the bodies. Russian President Boris Yeltsin called the Romanov executions a shameful chapter in Russian history. On August 15, 2000, the Romanovs were canonized by the Russian Orthodox Church as Passion Bearers. Later that same year, the Church of All Saints was constructed in Yekaterinburg, where the Epitev house stood. It was completed in 2003. On October 1, 2008, the Supreme Court of the Russian Federation rehabilitated Nicholas and his family after ruling that they were victims of political repression. The Communist Party of the Russian Federation denounced this rehabilitation and said that it would soon be corrected. The Romanovs are now buried at Peter and Paul Cathedral in St. Petersburg.